What's up everybody, I'm Jake Moore and I'm here to teach you the entire process of how to make your own set of Spidey lenses from scratch using a 3D printer. Now I know not everybody has their own 3D printer, and if you don't, it's okay. You've got a few options. Option 1, you could find somebody who does have one and ask them to use it. Option 2, you could use a service like Shapeways, which will print it for you and ship it to you. Or option 3, if you're on the $15 or higher tier of my Patreon, I can print it for you at a discounted price. Now this tutorial is split up into two parts. This is part 1, where I'll show you how to draw your lenses and 3D model them in Maya. Part 2 will cover printing, shaping, and finishing off your lenses. The first step is drawing your lenses, so let's get started.
Alright, so first things first, we need a 2D flat image of our lenses. I personally like to draw them. However, if you're lucky, you can find them online already made. When it comes to getting the right size for the lenses, you kind of have to just guess. But that's the good thing about drawing them, is you can always redraw them if they're too big or too small. So I will just go ahead and draw these out real quick, and I'll fast forward a bit. Once you have a shape that you like, you'll want to put down a nice thick border. That way, when we're doing the 3D model, we can see it very clearly. Now, if you want your frames to be rounded and not just flat while printing, you'll have to do two things. One is put a line connecting the two corners, here at the top and here at the bottom. The second thing you'll have to do is add a bisecting line all the way around the frames. This just means drawing a line down the middle of the frame, like this. So this is my final shape. Now it's time to cut it out. I like to use an X-Acto because it gives me better control. However, you can use scissors or a cutting wheel or whatever you prefer. Once you have it all cut out, it's time to check the size. I have a face shell that I use, but if you don't have a face shell, you can just hold it up to your face. If it's too big or too small, just retrace it onto a new piece of paper, make it a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, depending on what you need. I think this size and shape is just perfect, so I'm going to stick with this. Now that we have finished our drawing and we've cut it out, we need to get it on our computer. What I normally do is just take a picture with my phone and then either email it to myself, or since I have an iPhone, I can airdrop it straight to my Mac. Make sure you get it nice and flat so you have a straight on image. The 3D modeling app that I like to use is called Maya. It's from Autodesk. They also make CAD and 3ds Max. Maya is kind of like the Mac version of 3ds Max, although it's more for animation than modeling. But this is what I learned on, so it's what I use. The first thing I'm going to do is split up my view. I'm going to get out of this 3D view and get over into the top view. So to do that, I'm going to hit the space bar, and it's going to bring up all 4 views. Then I'm going to click and focus on the top view, and then press space bar again, and it'll zoom into that. We'll zoom out a little bit so we can get a better view. And then we'll import our image as an image plane by going to View, Image Plane, Import Image. Now just find your image wherever you saved it. I've got a specific folder. And it should just pop it in right there. So we'll zoom in to get a nice close view. And to start off, we're going to insert a plane. A plane is just a 2-dimensional flat geometry. We'll move our plane and try to kind of align it with the frame itself. So I press W to get the move tool and I move it over, and then I'm going to rotate it by hitting E. You can click and drag on that outside circle to make it rotate. Now I'm going to move these vertices. So I'm going to right click on the plane and then drag over to where it says vertex. Now I can select these vertices, hit W to bring up the move tool, and then move them. I can also click on them individually, or click and drag to select them and move them that way. So we're just trying to have this plane follow the shape of our frame. I'm on a MacBook, so in order to pan around, I hit Command and Option, and then click and drag. The next step is to continue this plane all along the shape of our frame. So we're going to use the Append to Polygon tool. I have it pinned in my toolbar here, but you can also find it under Mesh Tools, Append to Polygon. So you'll click on the edge of your polygon, and then you'll click on the bottom and the top and hit Enter. And that will make a new section of the plane. So we're going to repeat that process a lot, all the way around the frame. And we don't have to be perfect, so don't worry about that. We'll clean it up later. So again, you'll use that tool, you'll click on the edge, and then you'll click on the bottom right and the top right, and then hit Enter. Once you get towards the corner, you'll want to keep the inside edges really close together and fan it out bigger at the outside edge, like this. Now that you're starting to move away from that corner, you can go back to having them be evenly spaced out. Now that we've finished going all the way around and creating our polygons, I'm going to fix the spacing up here a little bit because I noticed I got them a little closer together when I ended than when I started. So I'm going to right click and choose Edges. And I'll pick the edges, kind of every other one, and delete them to make the spacing a little bit more even. After you delete the edges, you'll still have remaining vertices. So we're going to right click and choose Vertices, and then we're going to select and delete all of these remaining ones. You can hold down Shift while clicking to select multiple vertices. I'll go ahead and do the same thing over here as well because it's still a little tight. Now that our polygons are a little bit more evenly spaced, we're going to go in and start cleaning up the vertices. The first thing I noticed is that where we ended and started our shape is a little bit messy. So I'll select this vertex and delete it, and that's going to get rid of these edges as well. So I'm going to use this split polygon tool, or edge ring tool, and insert a new edge loop right here. You can find that either on your toolbar if you already have it there, or Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. If you click and drag, you can see a little dotted green line that'll show you where your new edge will be. Now let's start moving these vertices around to start smoothing out our frames. This is a really long and tedious process, but that's just how 3D modeling is. So we're just going to click on the vertex, hit W for the Move tool, and then we can just click and drag it to kind of follow the line we've drawn. I'll go ahead and do this all the way around on the inside and the outside edges. So we just finished fixing up the shape of our frames. Now we need to add that middle line so we can make it rounded when it's printing. We do that by using the Edge Loop tool again. You can either find that on your toolbar or under Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. So we're going to click and drag on one of these inside edges, and you can see it makes a line all the way around the inside. It doesn't line up perfectly with the shape that we drew, but that's fine. It just means that our line that we drew wasn't perfectly centered. After we added that edge loop, we can see that the line we drew in the corner was not exactly where we want it to be. So I'm just going to use the move tool and manually move around these vertices to make it look more like what I wanted. Cool, so now that we've fixed that corner, we no longer need this background image. So I'm going to right click and choose Object Mode, click on the very edge of the image to select it, and then just hit Delete. Now that that's gone, I can see that the edges are a little bit wonky in this area, so I'm going to zoom in and just move the vertices around to try and make it smoother. Now before moving on, I like where this mesh is right now, so I'm going to duplicate it, but first I want to center the pivot on this object. That can be found under Modify, Center Pivot. That just realigns where the pivot is so that when we move it, it's from the center. Now that we've done that, I want to duplicate this mesh. So I'm going to hit Command D on my Mac, and then I can just drag it up out of the way. This is just to save it in its current state. In case I mess up, I can always go back to it later. Now we're going to make this more 3D looking. So I hit space to bring up all 4 views, and then I click and focus in the 3D view, and I hit space again to focus on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to extrude this a little bit first, because it's currently just 2D. You can do that by going to Edit Mesh, Extrude, or you can find it in your toolbar. So once you do that, it'll bring up this new arrow, and you'll just want to pull up on the yellow arrow a little bit. We don't need much height here. You can still do stuff like pan around and zoom in while you're using this tool. So I'm going to zoom in really close and see about how thick I'm making it. Like I said, it doesn't have to be real thick, so this is probably fine. Now we're going to select that edge that we made all the way around the center. So I'm going to right click and choose Edge, and then double click one of those sections, and it will select all the way around. Now I have the Move tool with W, I'm just going to pull it upwards. And I can rotate to see about how big I'm making it. This thickness looks pretty good, so we need to start getting this model ready to smooth it out. So we're going to use the Insert Edge Loop tool and add new edges all around where we want it to stay sharp. The way that works is the closer you have 2 edges together, the more sharp it will be once it rounds out. So we don't want this top part to be very sharp, so I'm going to pull it down a little lower. Now I'll add another edge loop at the bottom. We want this to be really sharp, that way it will print well on the 3D printer. So I'm going to rotate so I can see the bottom, and I'll do the same thing on those 2 edges there. And I'll add another one on the inside at the bottom and the top. Now I'll zoom out and rotate to get a better view, and we're going to change to object mode. So we're going to right click and choose object mode, and we can preview how it will look when it's smoothed out by just pressing the 3 key on our keyboard. Now that looks pretty good. I think it's a little thin though, so I'm just going to select the object and hit 1 to go back to regular polygon mode. I'm going to double click this edge here to select it all the way around. I'm going to pull it up a little higher. Then I just go back to object mode and I hit 3 to preview. That's better, but it's a little too thick. Especially on this inside corner here. So I'll undo that change I did and make it a little less tall. And I'll go back into my smooth view and see how it looks. Now that's better. What I want to do now is duplicate it again just to have another safe point in case it messes up. Now we're going to make it actually smooth instead of just previewing it. So we're going to select our object and go to Mesh Smooth, and now you can see there's a whole lot more polygons. This means it's an actually smooth model. So we're done modeling our object. We just have to export it. So we'll go to File, Export, and then save it wherever you want.
Alright, so that about wraps up part 1 of the tutorial. We learned how to draw our lenses and 3D model them in Maya. Make sure you tune back in for part 2 where I show you how to print them, shape them, and finish them off. See you next time.